I was staring at my phone screen, reading the text message for the third time, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. The words were simple, brutal, and came from my own father. If you don't hand over those keys by tomorrow morning, you're no longer part of this family. Your mother agrees. So does everyone else. Don't make us choose between you and Jess. My vision blurred. 28 years of trying to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the success story they could brag about to their country club friends, and it had come down to this. A text message, an ultimatum, over a car. Not just any car, mind you, my company vehicle. The midnight blue SUV I'd worked 70-hour weeks to afford that I needed for client meetings across 3 counties that had my business insurance and my name on the title. But to them, it was just a thing I should hand over to my older sister Jess, because she had kids, and I didn't, because her minivan was too cramped, because in the twisted logic of my family, my success was somehow their communal property. I sat there in my home office. The same office where I'd built my consulting business from nothing, where I'd pulled all-nighters to land contracts that now supported not just me, but apparently half my family's lifestyle. And I felt something crack inside me. Not break crack. Like ice on a frozen lake just before it gives way completely. The thing about that cracking sound is that you can't unhear it. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like your achievements only mattered when someone else could claim them, or if you've been the financial backup plan for people who should have supported you, hit that like button. Subscribe because this story gets a whole lot more intense, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever been the family doormat. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand how I became the person who would tolerate receiving a text like that in the first place. Growing up as the youngest of 3 in the Morrison family of San Diego meant understanding your place in the hierarchy early and thoroughly. My brother Mark was the golden child, the firstborn son, who could do no wrong even when he dropped out of college twice. I still remember the family dinner where he announced he was leaving his second university. "These institutions just don't get me," Mark said, pushing his plate away dramatically. "They want to crush creativity, man. I need to find my own path." Dad nodded sagely. "Your brother's an independent thinker, Chloe. Not everyone fits in a box." Meanwhile, I was 14, pulling straight A's and babysitting every weekend to save for college, but that was just expected. That was what Chloe did. Then there was Jess, 5 years older than me, pretty and popular, and perpetually in need of rescue from her own bad decisions. She was the princess who could make mistakes and be forgiven before the tears even dried. I lost count of how many times I heard Mom say, "Well, Jessica is going through a lot right now." And then there was me, Chloe, the accident baby. I actually overheard Mom tell Aunt Carol once that I was a surprise. The way she said it didn't sound particularly pleasant. "We thought we were done," Mom had said, her voice carrying from the kitchen while I sat in the living room doing homework. Richard had just gotten his business stable. Jess was in middle school, then boom, pregnant again at 41. It wasn't in the plan. I was 10 when I heard that, old enough to understand, old enough for it to hurt. I learned early that love in my family was transactional, a system of debits and credits, where I was always supposed to be in the giving column. When I brought home straight A's in 8th grade, all 6 classes, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's my smart girl," he said, patting my head absently before turning to Mark. "Son, your mother says you're interested in music production now." Meanwhile, when Jess managed to scrape by with C's her senior year, it was treated like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Mom actually baked her favorite cake and invited relatives over. "She's trying so hard," Mom gushed to Aunt Carol, her voice thick with pride. "We're so proud of her effort. School has never been easy for Jessica, but she's really applying herself." I remember standing in the doorway of the kitchen, my report card with 6 A's clutched in my hand, wondering what I had to do to get a cake, wondering if anyone would throw me a party if I tried hard and got C's instead. But I already knew the answer. The formula was clear. Jess got celebrated for trying. I got a head pat for succeeding. Mark got endless chances to find himself. And I got expectations. Effort. That word did a lot of heavy lifting in our house, but only when it applied to my siblings. By the time I was in high school, I'd figured out the unspoken rules. Be excellent, but not so excellent that you make your siblings look bad. Be successful, but remember that success means you have the capacity to help others, meaning them. Be independent, but never so independent that you forget where you came from. Meaning don't forget to come back and fix their problems with your independence. I remember the day I got my acceptance letter to UC Berkeley, full scholarship, everything paid for. I was 17, sitting at the kitchen table, and I'd never felt so proud of anything in my entire life. This was it. This was my ticket out, my proof that I mattered. I showed Dad first. He was in his study going over blueprints for a construction project. He took the letter, scanned it quickly, and handed it back. "Well, that's good," he said, already looking back at his papers. "Saves us money for Jess's wedding." I stood there frozen. Dad, Jess isn't even engaged. She's not even seriously dating anyone. "She will be," he said with the confidence of someone who'd already allocated my scholarship money in his mental budget. "And you know how expensive weddings are. Your mother's already talking about venues." Jess was 19 and working part-time at a boutique, but already they were planning how my achievement would fund her future celebration. That was the moment I should have seen it clearly. But I was 17, and I still believed that if I was good enough, successful enough, helpful enough, they would love me the way I needed to be loved. College was my escape, or so I thought. UC Berkeley felt like stepping into another world. I majored in business administration, worked 2 jobs, waited tables at an Italian restaurant near campus, and did bookkeeping for a small property management company on weekends. I was exhausted constantly, but I was free. I graduated summa cum laude, which prompted a congratulatory text from Mom and nothing from Dad or my siblings. I landed a position at a consulting firm in San Francisco, a sleek downtown office where people took my ideas seriously and my age wasn't held against me. For 3 glorious years, I lived 2 hours away from my family, close enough to visit for major holidays, but far enough that I could finally breathe. Far enough that the Sunday dinner guilt trips were just texts I could ignore until Monday. That's when I met Marcus Chen at a professional networking event in the financial district. It was one of those forced minglers with name tags and weak coffee, the kind of thing I usually dreaded. But Marcus made a joke about the sad vegetable platter, something about how if they really wanted to impress people, they should have sprung for the cheese that didn't come pre-sliced, and I laughed for the first time in weeks. He was a corporate lawyer, sharp as a blade, and funny in that dry, understated way that catches you off guard. We exchanged business cards, met for coffee the next week, and somehow became friends without either of us really trying. The kind of friends who could talk about everything from contract law to the best hole-in-the-wall Vietnamese restaurants in the city, who could sit in comfortable silence or debate for hours about whether financial regulation was sufficient or completely broken. He was the first person who saw me not as someone's daughter or sister, not as a means to an end, but as Chloe. Just Chloe. And apparently that was enough. With Marcus, I didn't have to be exceptional or useful or accommodating. I could just be. Marcus noticed things other people missed, like how I'd tense up whenever my phone rang and the caller ID showed a family member. How my voice would change, becoming smaller, somehow younger. Like how I'd casually mention helping out with Jess's car payment or Dad's business loan, dropping thousands of dollars into conversation, like it was normal for a 24-year-old to be the family's backup bank. One afternoon, we were having coffee at our usual spot, a cramped cafe in North Beach with excellent espresso and terrible seating. I just mentioned that I needed to transfer money to cover Jess's credit card payment because she'd overspent, and Mike would be angry if he found out. Marcus set his cup down carefully. "Chloe, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How much money have you given your family in the past year?" I shrugged, uncomfortable. "I don't know. I don't really keep track." "Ballpark." I did some quick mental math, and the number made my stomach hurt. "Maybe 15,000. Maybe closer to 20. He was quiet for a long moment. "That's not help," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm. "That's exploitation," with a smile. I laughed it off, that nervous laugh you make when someone gets too close to a truth you're not ready to face. "You don't understand family dynamics, Marcus. It's not like that. We take care of each other." "Do they take care of you?" The question hung in the air. I opened my mouth to say yes, of course they did, but the words wouldn't come, because when had any of them asked what I needed? When had they celebrated my successes without immediately calculating how those successes could benefit them? "It's different," I said finally. "You're an only child. You can't know what it meant to be part of a tight-knit family that takes care of each other." Marcus didn't push, but I saw the concern in his eyes. "Just promise me you'll think about it, about whether this is really mutual support or something else." I promised, but I didn't think about it. I couldn't afford to. Because if I really examined what my family relationships were built on, I might have to admit they were built on nothing that would hold. Except it wasn't each other taking care of each other. It was me taking care of them. Always them, never me. The pattern became clearer and impossible to ignore when I started my own consulting business at 26. I'd saved aggressively for 3 years, lived in a studio apartment in the Tenderloin that was barely bigger than a walk-in closet, where I could hear my neighbors' conversations through the walls, and the street noise never stopped. I ate ramen more nights than I care to admit, packing sad desk lunches while my coworkers went out for sushi. I said no to drinks, no to concerts, no to every fun thing people my age were supposed to be doing, all to build up enough capital to go out on my own, to build something that was entirely mine. Within 6 months, I had 3 corporate clients. Within a year, I had 6 and had moved to a better apartment in the Sunset District 1 with actual sunlight and neighbors I couldn't hear through the walls. Within 2 years, I was pulling in 6 figures and had to hire an assistant, a sharp recent graduate named Tyler, who reminded me of myself at that age, hungry and determined. Dad loved telling people about his daughter's success. I'd hear it secondhand from Aunt Carol or family friends. Richard says Chloe's really made something of herself, they'd say. He's so proud. But he never told me directly. The praise was always for public consumption currency he could spend with his golf buddies and church friends. Look what my daughter accomplished. Look what I raised. Mom would beam at church and talk about how she'd always known I was special, conveniently forgetting all the time she'd told me to be more like Jess, more social, more pleasant, less intense. Now my intensity was rebranded as drive, my isolation, as focus, my desperate need to prove my worth, as admirable ambition. And Jess started calling more often. Not to ask how I was, not to celebrate my successes, but always with a crisis that required my immediate financial intervention. The car accident happened 3 years into my business, on a Tuesday in April that started like any other. I was preparing for a major client presentation, the kind that could lead to a long-term contract worth serious money. I'd been working on it for 2 weeks, perfecting every slide, anticipating every question. That's when my phone started buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. Jess, Mom, Dad, Jess again, Mom again. A text from Mark saying, "Call home now." My stomach dropped. Someone had died. That was my first thought. Someone was in the hospital. There was an emergency, a real emergency. Not the usual brand of Morrison family crisis that turned out to be manufactured drama. I was in the conference room doing a final run-through with Tyler when the calls wouldn't stop. My phone vibrated so hard it skittered across the table. "I'm so sorry," I told Tyler. "I have to take this. Something's wrong." I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding, and called Mom back. "Chloe, thank God," she answered on the first ring, her voice high and strained. "Your sister needs you. We all need you. Where have you been?" "I'm at work, Mom. What happened? Is everyone okay?" "It's Jessica. There's been an accident. She's fine, she's not hurt, but Chloe, it's bad. It's really bad." Relief that she wasn't injured flooded through me, followed immediately by dread. "What kind of accident?" Mom's voice dropped to a whisper, like she was sharing a shameful secret. "A car accident. She hit someone. Well, their car. The person is fine, but Chloe, her insurance lapsed. She doesn't have coverage." My blood went cold. "What do you mean it lapsed?" "She missed some payments and they canceled the policy. She didn't realize. You know how these insurance companies are so quick to cancel, no warning." I knew that wasn't true. Insurance companies sent multiple warnings. But I didn't say that. "How bad is the damage?" "The other car needs repairs. Significant repairs. And Chloe, they're threatening to sue. Jessica is beside herself. Mike doesn't know yet he's on a business trip, and if he finds out, he'll be so angry with her. Can you talk to her? She needs you." The phone was passed over. I could hear Jess sobbing before she even spoke. "Chloe?" Her voice was wrecked thick with tears. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I know you're busy. I don't know what to do. I really messed up this time." "Tell me what happened," I said, leaning against the wall, watching through the glass, as Tyler nervously organized papers on the conference table. The story came out in gasps and sobs. She'd been texting while driving just for a second, just to respond to a friend. She'd rear-ended someone at a red light. Not high speed, but enough to cause damage. The other driver was a lawyer of all things, and he'd been very clear about documentation and liability. "And Jess," I said slowly, "why did your insurance lapse?" Silence. Then in a smaller voice, "I missed the payments." "For how long?" 3 months. 3 months, my voice came out sharper than I intended. "Jess, they send warnings. Multiple warnings." I know, okay, I screwed up, but Chloe, I had other expenses. The girls needed new clothes for school, and we'd already booked that trip to Cabo, and I couldn't cancel that because it was Sarah's bachelorette party, and I was the maid of honor. I thought I could catch up on the insurance before anything happened, but then this happened. You spent your insurance money on a bachelorette trip to Cabo. The words sat in my throat, bitter and accusatory. But what would be the point? She already knew. And she knew I would fix it. That's what I always did. How much are we talking about? I asked. The estimate is $30,000 for the other guy's car. Maybe more if there's underlying damage. And Chloe, if Mike finds out I let the insurance lapse, he'll lose it. He's already stressed about money because of his mother's medical bills. And if he knows I spent that money on the Cabo trip instead of insurance, it could really hurt our marriage. Please, you're the only one who can help. You're the only one who has the money. There it was, the real reason for the call. Not because I was her sister, not because she valued our relationship, but because I had become the family's emergency ATM. I need you to loan it to me, she continued, her voice taking on that particular mixture of desperation and entitlement I'd come to recognize. That tone that said she was asking but also expecting that said no wasn't an option. Just until Mike's bonus comes through at Christmas. I'll pay you back with interest, I swear. I'll pay you back double. Please, Chloe, I'm begging you. You're the only one who can help me. It was April. Christmas was 8 months away. Mike's bonuses were never guaranteed. I knew that from previous conversations. He worked in medical sales, and his compensation was tied to his numbers. Some years it was good. Some years it was barely anything. And Jess had a history of optimistically banking on money that never materialized, spending future earnings like they were already in her account. I closed my eyes. Through the glass, I could see Tyler checking his watch. My presentation was in 40 minutes. My big opportunity to land a contract that could define my next year. But she was my sister. Family helped family. That's what they'd always taught me. That's what they drilled into my head from the moment I was old enough to understand. Morrisons take care of Morrisons. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll handle it. Really? Oh my God. Chloe, thank you. Thank you so much. I love you. You're the best sister ever. I promise I'll pay you back, I swear on my kids' lives. This will never happen again. I called my bank from the hallway. Requested a personal loan using my business as collateral, feeling sick as I signed the electronic documents on my phone. $30,000, plus interest, plus the risk of tying up my business credit line for something that had nothing to do with my business. I transferred the money to Jess that same day, right there in the hallway outside my conference room. She called immediately when it hit her account, crying with relief, gushing about how I'd saved her life, her marriage, everything. I promise, Chloe, I'll pay you back with interest. I'll start as soon as Mike's bonus comes in. This will never happen again. I've learned my lesson, I swear. I went back into that meeting shaking. I nailed the presentation anyway because that's what I did. I compartmentalized, I performed, I delivered. But that night alone in my apartment, I let myself feel it. The resentment, the exhaustion, the creeping realization that I'd just taken out a loan that could cripple my business, if anything went wrong, all to bail out my sister's irresponsibility. I never saw a penny of that money again. Christmas came and went. I spent it at my parents' house watching Jess open expensive presents from Mike, including a designer handbag she'd been wanting. Nobody mentioned the money. It was like it had never happened. In January, I gently brought it up over a phone call. Hey Jess, just wondering about the repayment plan. No pressure, just want to get it scheduled. Silence. Then, oh yeah, so Mike's bonus was smaller than we expected. Like way smaller. And we really needed it for the kids' private school tuition. You know how expensive Montessori is. I'm sorry, can we push it back a few months? A few months became summer. We have that family vacation to Hawaii we already booked. It's non-refundable. You understand, right? I can't disappoint the kids. Summer became fall. Our water heater died, completely flooded the garage. We had to replace it immediately. These things are so expensive, Chloe. You wouldn't believe it. Every excuse came delivered with the same wounded expression in her voice, like I was being petty for remembering she owed me the equivalent of a year's salary for some people, like I was the problem for keeping track. When I finally worked up the courage to mention it to Mom during a Sunday dinner, she set down her fork and looked at me with disappointment. Chloe family doesn't keep score, she said, her tone suggesting I'd committed some social faux pas. Jessica is raising 2 children. You're single. You don't have the same expenses. You can afford to wait. Why are you making this difficult? But apparently family did expect you to bankrupt yourself for them. That much was crystal clear. The SUV came after I'd spent 2 years clawing my business back to stability after that loan. I'd landed a major contract with a tech company that required frequent travel to their offices in Orange County, San Jose, and Sacramento. My aging sedan wasn't going to cut it. I needed something reliable, professional, spacious enough to transport presentation materials and equipment, and comfortable enough for long drives. I spent weeks researching, comparing, calculating. I finally settled on a certified pre-owned Audi Q5, 3 years old, impeccably maintained in a gorgeous midnight blue that made me smile every time I saw it. I registered it under my LLC, for the tax benefits got commercial insurance, and felt a surge of pride every time I drove it. This was mine. I'd earned it. Every payment was made on time from my business account. No loans, no help from anyone. For exactly 8 months, I enjoyed that car in peace. Then came the Sunday dinner where my life imploded. Sunday dinners at my parents' house in La Jolla were a tradition, one of those obligations wrapped in the language of love. Missing one required a doctor's note and a follow-up guilt trip. That particular Sunday in late September started like any other. Dad grilled steaks on their palatial back deck overlooking the ocean. Mom made her famous garlic mashed potatoes. Jess and Mike brought their 2 kids, Emma 7 and Lucas 5. Mark showed up late as usual, fresh from whatever his latest venture was, which seemed to involve a lot of talking about cryptocurrency and not much actual employment. My Aunt Carol was there too, Dad's sister, the only family member I genuinely looked forward to seeing. She was 65, divorced, fiercely independent, and had built a successful real estate career by herself. She'd always been kind to me, the kind of kindness that didn't come with invoices. We sat around the long dining table, the one Mom insisted on covering with her good tablecloth, despite having grandchildren who treated it like a napkin. The meal was pleasant enough. I talked about a new contract I'd just signed. Dad grunted approval. Jess looked annoyed, which was her default setting when anyone else received positive attention. Then, just as Mom brought out her famous peach cobbler, Dad put down his fork. The sound of silver hitting china had a finality to it that made everyone look up. "Got something to announce," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone of assumed authority that came from 40 years of running his own construction company, where his word was law and no one questioned him. I felt Aunt Carol shift beside me, a tiny movement of tension. "It's decided," Dad continued, looking directly at me. "Chloe, you're going to give your SUV to Jess and Mike. They need the space for the kids. That minivan is too cramped, especially with all the activities." The room went silent except for the sound of Lucas banging his spoon on his plate. I stared at my father, waiting for the punchline, for the smile that would indicate this was some kind of weird joke. It didn't come. Jess leaned forward, her expression a calculated mixture of hope and fake reluctance. "Dad, I told you to let me talk to Chloe first," she said, but her eyes were already gleaming with triumph. "Nothing to talk about," Dad said. "Family takes care of family. Chloe's got that fancy car sitting in her driveway most days anyway. You two drive those kids all over Kingdom Come. Makes sense." I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I intended. "That's not a personal car, Dad. It's registered to my business. I need it for client meetings." "You can get another one," he said dismissively, reaching for the cobbler. "Your business is doing fine. Consider it your contribution to helping your sister." My contribution. As if the 30,000 I'd never seen again wasn't contribution enough. As if the countless small loans, the co-signed credit cards, the emergency funds, the birthday gifts for kids that cost more than Jess ever spent on them. All of it wasn't contribution. "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Dad's head snapped up. Mom froze with the cobbler server in midair. Mark actually looked up from his phone. Jess's face went through several colors before settling on an angry red. "What did you say?" Dad's voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet. I set my napkin down carefully, deliberately. My hands wanted to shake, but I wouldn't let them. "I said no. That's my business vehicle. The answer is no." "Now you listen here, young lady," Dad started, but I stood up. "No, you listen," I said, and my voice was steady now, powered by years of swallowed words. "That car is titled to my company. It's insured under my commercial policy. I need it for my work. The work that, by the way, helped pay for Jess's car accident settlement, that she still hasn't paid back." "That's different," Mom jumped in. "That was an emergency." "And this isn't," I said. "This is convenience. There's a difference." Jess stood up, tears already forming in her eyes, her favorite weapon. "I can't believe you're being so selfish. We're family, Chloe. Don't you care about your niece and nephew?" "I love Emma and Lucas," I said. "But loving them doesn't mean I have to give up my business assets because you want an upgrade." Mike finally spoke up, his voice hard. "Chloe, think about what you're doing. You're really going to cause family drama over a car." I'm not causing anything, I said. I'm declining to be voluntold what to do with my property. That's not the same thing. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. This is not a discussion, Chloe. This is what's happening. You will give them that car or there will be consequences. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. This man who had spent my entire life treating my accomplishments as family resources to be distributed at his discretion, who had never once asked what I wanted, what I needed, what my dreams were, beyond being the family's safety net. Then I guess there will be consequences, I said quietly. I picked up my purse and walked out. Behind me, the shouting started, Mom crying, Jess shrieking about how ungrateful I was, Dad's voice booming threats, Mark surprisingly telling them to calm down, Aunt Carol's voice cutting through the chaos with something sharp I couldn't quite hear. I got in my midnight blue SUV, the one they wanted to take from me, and I drove home through streets blurred by tears. I hadn't realized I was crying. The text message came the next morning while I was trying to focus on a client presentation. The ultimatum, the threat, the line drawn in the sand. I called Marcus. He arrived at my place within an hour carrying 2 coffees and a look of grim determination. I showed him the text. I showed him everything, the whole sordid financial history I'd been tracking in a black leather journal I kept locked in my desk. Not because I was planning anything, but because some part of me needed to see it written down, needed proof I wasn't crazy, that this was real, that I was being used. Marcus read through it all. The loan for Jess's accident, the credit card I'd co-signed for her that she'd maxed out and defaulted on, tanking my credit score for 2 years. The emergency funds that happened every few months. The time Dad had needed my signature as a reference for a business loan, and I'd later discovered he'd forged my signature on the actual loan documents, making me liable if he defaulted. That last one was illegal. Fraud, identity theft. Chloe, Marcus said quietly, setting down the journal. This isn't a family. This is a criminal enterprise using emotional manipulation as a business model. They're my family, I whispered. Family doesn't steal from you, he said. Family doesn't commit fraud in your name. Family doesn't threaten to disown you because you won't hand over your business vehicle. He pulled out his laptop. We need to document everything. Get copies of every text, email, bank statement, loan document, everything. And then we're going to do something you should have done years ago. What's that? Fight back. The next few days were a blur of documentation and preparation. Marcus worked with me to compile everything into a comprehensive file. The evidence was damning. Years of financial abuse clearly documented. The forged signature, which I'd found buried in old paperwork and photographed, was the nuclear option. Then Jess and Mike made their first mistake. They tried to take the SUV by force. I was on a video call with a client when my security app pinged. I had cameras installed after a break-in scare in my neighborhood the year before. The notification showed 2 people at my driveway. I switched screens and felt my blood freeze. Jess and Mike were standing next to my SUV. Mike was holding something up to the lock. A key. They'd made a copy somehow, probably from the spare I'd foolishly left at my parents' house for emergencies years ago. I muted my client call and ran downstairs. By the time I got there, Mike had the door open and was climbing into the driver's seat. Get out of my car, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. Jess whirled around. Dad said we could take it. You were being unreasonable, so we're just taking what should have been ours anyway. That's theft, I said. Get out of the car now. Mike started the engine. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Yes, hi, I need police assistance. 2 people are attempting to steal my vehicle from my driveway right now. Chloe, don't you dare, Jess hissed, but there was panic in her eyes now. I gave the dispatcher my address, my name, a description of the vehicle, and a description of the 2 people currently in it. I stayed on the line. I kept my phone camera recording. Mike turned off the engine and got out of the car, hands raised. Okay, we're not stealing anything. This is a family matter. You're in my vehicle without permission, using a key you copied without authorization. That's theft. You're going to have your own sister arrested. Jess's voice was rising to that hysterical pitch she used when she wasn't getting her way. I'm going to protect my property, I said. What you do next is up to you. The police arrived 7 minutes later, 2 officers both looking weary at being called to what was obviously a domestic situation. I explained calmly, showed them the vehicle registration in my name, explained I'd never given permission for them to take it or make copies of the key. Jess sobbed and ranted about family betrayal. Mike tried the reasonable approach, explaining this was all a misunderstanding. We were siblings working out a disagreement. The officers looked at me. Do you want to press charges? I hesitated. This was the line. Once crossed, there was no going back. Then I remembered the text message, the ultimatum, the years of being used and discarded and expected to smile about it. I want them trespassed from my property, I said. And I want it on record that they attempted to take my vehicle without permission. The officers filed a report. They couldn't arrest anyone because technically Jess and Mike hadn't actually stolen the car they'd just tried. But there was now a police report documenting the incident. They were verbally warned about trespassing. Jess's parting words as they walked back to their actual minivan were, "You're dead to this family, dead. Mom and Dad will never forgive you." I went back inside and threw up from stress. Then I called Marcus. "Change the locks on everything," he said immediately. "House car office if you have one. Get new keys made, and Chloe. This is about to get worse before it gets better. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the alternative. Backing down, apologizing, handing over the car to keep the peace. Continuing to be the family ATM machine, the one who sacrificed so others could have what they wanted. "I'm ready," I said. Marcus drew up a cease and desist letter. It was beautiful in its clinical brutality. It listed every documented incident of financial abuse. It referenced the police report. It specifically called out the forged signature on the business loan documents. It demanded immediate cessation of all harassment, including contact with my clients or business associates, or face legal action including civil suits for defamation, harassment, and criminal charges for fraud. He sent it certified mail to Richard and Helen Morrison Jessica and Michael Preston. 4 separate letters, each one a little legal bomb. But Jess couldn't leave it alone. She never could. When the threatening texts and calls didn't break me, when blocking their numbers didn't stop them from using friends' phones, Jess went for my business. She found out about my upcoming contract with a major client, a Silicon Valley firm that was going to triple my annual revenue. I don't know how she got the information. Maybe she'd hacked my email. Maybe she'd convinced Mark to do it. He was good with computers when it suited him. She called my primary contact at the company, a woman named Jennifer, who I'd been working with for 3 months, building trust and demonstrating value. Jess introduced herself as my sister. She cried. She told Jennifer I was stealing money from my family to fund my lavish lifestyle, that I was emotionally abusive, that I'd had a breakdown and couldn't be trusted with major contracts. Jennifer called me immediately, confused and concerned. We had a good enough relationship that she wanted to hear my side before making any decisions. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was planted. I sat in my office after that call, shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. They'd gone after my clients, my business, the one thing I'd built entirely on my own, that had nothing to do with them, that they'd already benefited from, more than they had any right to. This was war. Marcus came to my house that evening. We sat at my dining table and I showed him the black leather journal again, but this time I showed him everything, including the papers I'd found buried in old files from when I was first starting my business, when I'd been too naive and too desperate for family approval to question what I was signing. The credit card application Dad had submitted in my name when I was 23, fresh out of college, forging my signature. He'd maxed it out for his business expenses and defaulted, destroying my credit for years. I'd thought it was identity theft by a stranger at the time. I'd filed reports, spent months clearing my name. It wasn't until 2 years ago that I'd found an old envelope with my father's handwriting on it, containing the original application hidden in a box of old paperwork he'd asked me to store in my garage. I'd never confronted him. I'd told myself I must be wrong, that my father wouldn't do that. But I wasn't wrong. The handwriting was his. The information used was from my college records that only he had access to. The signature was a crude attempt at mimicking mine. "This is felony fraud," Marcus said quietly. "Chloe, with this, you could have him prosecuted. He could face years in prison." "I know," I said. "Is that what you want?" I thought about it, really thought about it. Did I want to see my father in prison? Did I want to destroy him? No, but I wanted him to understand that I could. I wanted all of them to understand that I wasn't helpless, wasn't their victim anymore, wasn't the doormat they could walk across whenever convenient. "I want them to stop," I said. "Completely, forever, I want my life back." Marcus nodded slowly. He spent the next hour drafting something he called a settlement agreement, though there was nothing to settle. It was more like terms of surrender. Meanwhile, my business hung in the balance. Jennifer had put the contract on hold pending internal review, which was corporate speak for, "We're freaked out and need to think about this." I spent 2 days crafting the most professional, calm, and thorough email I'd ever written, explaining that I was dealing with a family situation involving boundary violations, and that I'd been forced to take legal action to protect myself and my business. I attached the police report from the attempted car theft. I provided Marcus's contact information as my attorney should they want third-party verification. Jennifer called me 2 days later. "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said. "And I'm sorry I let it shake my confidence in you. That was unprofessional of me. If you're still interested, we'd like to move forward with the contract." I cried after that call, from relief, from stress, from the sheer exhaustion of fighting on multiple fronts. The next attack came from Mom. She called from a number I didn't recognize, catching me off guard. Her voice was broken, sobbing. "How could you do this to us?" she wailed. "Your father is devastated. Jess is on medication for anxiety because of you. You're tearing this family apart over material things, Chloe. Over a car. Is that really who you are?" I'd prepared for this. Marcus had warned me it would come. The guilt trip, the emotional manipulation, the attempt to make me the villain of a story where I was actually the victim. "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Where were you when they tried to steal my car? Where were you when Jess called my client to sabotage my business? Where were you when Dad forged my signature on legal documents?" Silence. "You were silent," I answered for her. "You're always silent when they do things to me. But I'm supposed to be the bigger person, right? I'm supposed to just take it because we're family." "Well, here's the thing, Mom. Family doesn't mean I have to let myself be destroyed." "You're not being destroyed, you're being dramatic," she snapped, her grief transforming instantly to irritation. "So Jess borrowed some money, so what? So your dad made a mistake years ago. You're successful now, it all worked out. Why are you punishing us?" "Borrowed implies intent to return," I said. "And forging someone's signature isn't a mistake. It's a crime. I'm not punishing anyone, Mom. I'm just not being a victim anymore. There's a difference." She hung up on me. Aunt Carol called that evening. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "I should have said something years ago. I watched them do this to you and I told myself it wasn't my business, but I was wrong. If you need someone to testify or provide a statement or anything, I'm here." I cried again, but these were different tears. The final confrontation came 2 weeks later, exactly as Marcus predicted it would. Dad called. Not Mom, not Jess, but Dad himself. His voice was different, not angry, not dismissive, careful. "We need to talk," he said. "Face to face, Sunday dinner, one last time. Work this out like adults." "I'm not handing over my car," I said immediately. "Not about the car," he said. "About family, about fixing this. Your mother is beside herself. Can't sleep, can't eat. Your sister is in therapy. This has gone too far, Chloe. We need to find middle ground." Marcus advised against going. "It's a trap," he said. "They'll gang up on you, try to manipulate you into backing down." "Then come with me," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. "As your lawyer?" "As my lawyer." I saw something shift in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or respect. "Then we're not going empty-handed," he said. That Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for what I knew would be the last time. Marcus followed in his own car. He had a briefcase. I had the black leather journal. I rang the doorbell. Mom answered. Her face went pale when she saw Marcus behind me. "What is he doing here?" she asked. "This is Marcus Chen, my attorney," I said. "Since this is apparently a legal matter, I thought it best to have legal representation." "This is a family matter," Dad's voice came from inside. "We don't need lawyers." "Then you shouldn't have sent me a cease and desist threat via text," I said, walking in uninvited. That made it legal. The whole family was there. Dad sitting in his usual chair like a king on a throne. Jess and Mike on the couch looking sullen. Mark standing by the window for once looking uncomfortable. Mom hovering, wringing her hands. Aunt Carol was there too, sitting in the corner, and she gave me a small nod. I sat down. Marcus stood beside me, setting his briefcase on the coffee table with a decisive click. "Let's be clear about why we're here," Dad started. "We need to settle this family dispute before it destroys us all. Chloe, you've made your point. You're independent, you're successful, we get it. But this vendetta has to stop." "Vendetta," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling self-defense now?" "You called the cops on your own sister," Jess burst out. "You threatened to sue us. You've turned into someone we don't even recognize." "Good," I said, "because the person you recognized was a doormat." "Chloe," Mom gasped. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," I said, and I heard my voice strong and clear and completely calm. "Because this isn't a negotiation. This is me drawing a line that will never be crossed again." Marcus opened his briefcase. He pulled out a folder. Inside were multiple documents, all labeled, all organized. "This is a comprehensive record of financial abuse spanning 7 years. Marcus said, his voice professionally neutral. loans totaling $84,000 that have never been repaid. Multiple credit accounts opened using Chloe's information without authorization. And this, he pulled out a plastic sleeve containing the fraudulent credit card application, is identity theft and fraud. He laid it on the table in front of Dad. Richard Morrison, this is your handwriting. This is Chloe's forged signature. This document was used to open a credit card in her name that you maxed out and defaulted on, destroying her credit rating for 2 years. This is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Dad's face went white, then red. That was a misunderstanding. I was helping her build credit. By committing fraud, Marcus asked. Interesting definition of help. He pulled out another document. This is the police report from the attempted theft of Chloe's vehicle. This is a compilation of text messages threatening disownment unless she surrendered her property. This is a sworn statement from her client, Jennifer Hartman, detailing the defamatory phone call from Jessica Preston. Each document landed on the table like a bomb. This is everything we need to file both criminal charges and a civil suit, Marcus continued. The criminal charges alone could result in significant prison time for Richard and potentially Jessica for the attempted theft and the defamation. The civil suit would seek full restitution of all money taken, plus damages for the harm to Chloe's credit, her business, and her mental health. We estimate somewhere in the range of $300,000. Jess made a choking sound. Mike had gone gray. However, Marcus said, and the word hung in the air like a lifeline, Chloe is willing to offer an alternative. He pulled out one final document. This is a settlement agreement. Sign it and all of this goes away. Refuse it and by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, we file everything with the district attorney and the civil court. Dad found his voice. You can't do this. I'm your father. You're a man who committed fraud, I said. Being my father doesn't exempt you from the law. What's in the agreement? Mom asked, her voice barely a whisper. I stood up. I'd practiced this speech 100 times in my head. First, a formal written apology notarized acknowledging every incident of financial abuse, the forged documents, the attempted theft, and the business defamation. This document will be held by my attorney. If any of you ever try to harm me or my business again, it will be filed with the authorities. Second, all contact ends permanently. No calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at my house or business. No contact with my clients, colleagues, or friends. You will never speak my name to anyone outside immediate family. I am for all intents and purposes no longer part of this family by your own choice. Jess sobbed. Mom looked like she was going to faint. Third, I will establish a trust fund for Emma and Lucas. $20,000 each held until they turn 18 to be used exclusively for education. The fund will be managed by me and Aunt Carol. You will have no access to it. Any violation of the first 2 conditions will result in the fund being dissolved and donated to charity. That's it, Mark spoke for the first time. You're just cutting us off. You cut me off first, I said. Remember the text message? We didn't mean it, Mom said desperately. Yes, you did, I said. You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd call your bluff. But here's what you don't understand. I don't need you. I never did. You needed me, my money, my success, my willingness to be the family emergency fund, and I'm done. Dad stood up, his face purple with rage. If you walk out that door with these threats, you'll never be welcome back. Never. You'll regret this. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I felt nothing, no fear, no guilt, no desperate need for his approval, just nothing. I already regret spending 28 years trying to earn love from people who only valued me as a resource, I said. Signing those papers is your choice, but let me be clear, if you don't sign, I will prosecute, I will sue. I will take everything you have, and I will not lose sleep over it. I picked up the black leather journal and held it up. 7 years of receipts, text messages, emails, bank statements, loan documents, and legal evidence. Marcus has copies. My accountant has copies. They're in 3 separate secure locations. This isn't a bluff, Dad. This is the bill coming due. Chloe, please, Mom begged. We can fix this. We can be better. You've had 28 years to be better, I said. You chose not to. I'm just choosing something different now. I'm choosing me. Marcus set a pen on top of the settlement agreement. You have 48 hours to sign and return this to my office. After that, we proceed with legal action. The choice is yours. We walked out. Aunt Carol followed us. On the front porch, she pulled me into a hug. Thank you for being brave, she whispered. I should have protected you better. It's not your job to protect me from my own family, I said. But it is my job to tell you I love you, the real you, not the you they wanted you to be. And I'm so proud of who you've become. That made me cry again. Marcus drove me home. We didn't talk much. When we pulled into my driveway, he said, "You know they're going to sign, right? They're not stupid. They know we have them." "I know," I said. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. "Lighter," I said, like I just set down a 100-pound backpack I'd been carrying for years. The settlement agreement came back 46 hours later, 1 hour before our deadline. All signatures, all notarized. The apology letter was stiff and resentful, clearly written by a lawyer, but it was there. In writing, admitting everything. Marcus put it in a safe deposit box. "Insurance policy," he said, "just in case." 3 months passed. The contract with the Silicon Valley firm went through. My business grew. I hired 2 more people. I started sleeping through the night again. I went to therapy, which I should have done years ago. Dr. Kim helped me understand that what I'd experienced was a form of domestic abuse, that financial exploitation and emotional manipulation were real traumas, and that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I got a call from Emma's school. They wanted to verify that I'd set up a trust fund for her education. They were calling because Jess had tried to access it early for expenses. I confirmed the terms, the restrictions, and added an additional layer of verification. The school counselor mentioned carefully that Emma had said her Aunt Chloe didn't love them anymore. That hurt. But Marcus reminded me that I'd left the door open for a relationship with the kids when they were old enough to understand that the trust fund proved I cared and that I couldn't set myself on fire to keep them warm. I focused on building a life I actually wanted. I joined a book club. I started taking salsa lessons. I adopted a dog, a goofy golden retriever named Pancake, who had no idea he was supposed to be a guard dog, but excelled at being a companion. Marcus and I grew closer, though we kept it professional, mostly. He was there for every milestone, every victory, every moment I doubted myself. And slowly, almost without noticing, friend became something more. 6 months after the settlement, I was driving up the Pacific Coast Highway, heading to a weekend getaway in Big Sur. Pancake was in the back seat, his head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. The sun was setting, painting the ocean gold and pink. My midnight blue SUV, the car that had become the symbol of my entire fight for independence, hummed smoothly along the curves. I had music playing windows down, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely happy. Not the performance of happiness I'd mastered for family gatherings, but real bone-deep joy. My phone rang through the car speakers. "Aunt Carol," I answered. "Hey, I'm on the coast. Can you hear the ocean?" "I can hear freedom," she laughed. "How's my favorite niece?" "Your only niece who still talks to you. My only niece who matters. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You know that, right?" "I know. Thank you for standing by me. Always. Oh, and Chloe, your mother asked me to pass along a message." My stomach clenched. "What?" "She saw on Facebook that your business won some award. She wanted you to know she saw it." That's it. That's it. I think in her way she's trying to say she's proud. She just doesn't know how to say it without strings attached. I thought about that. Maybe someday, years from now, there could be some kind of reconciliation. Some kind of relationship built on respect instead of obligation. Maybe. But not today. Today I was free. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "I'm going to go enjoy this sunset now." "You do that? Love you, kiddo." "Love you too." I hung up and turned the music back up. Pancake barked happily at a passing seagull. The road stretched out before me, full of possibilities, each mile taking me further from who I used to be and closer to who I was meant to become. The wheels of my life were finally rolling on a path I'd chosen myself, and I was never looking back. Here's what I learned: setting boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting yourself isn't cruel. And sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you choose. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, and you can't let people steal from you just because you share DNA. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself? What did you choose, and do you regret it? Drop your story in the comments, and if this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes that's exactly what saves you.